Good afternoon, everybody. I'm calling to order the Orleans Parish School Board Special Business Meeting for November 29th, 2022. The time is now 1:05 p.m. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Parker,
Present.
Mr. Zervigon,
Present.
Mr. Ashley, Dr. Batiste,
Present.
Ms. Bodwin,
Present.
Ms. Eames, Mr. Marshall,
Present.
also present Dr. Avis Williams, Superintendent, Ms. Ashley Halpern, Board Counsel. You have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Interpretation services are available during today's meeting, and so I will yield to our interpreters.
Thank you, President Parker. Good afternoon, board members, Superintendent Dr. Williams, and everyone. My name is Vic Quinn Pham. I'm a Vietnamese interpreter, and I will provide interpretation at this meeting. Xin chào toàn thể quý vị. Tôi tên là Việt, tôi là thông dịch viên. Tôi sẽ thông dịch cho quý vị trong buổi họp này. Nếu quý vị cần, xin cho tôi biết. Xin chân thành cảm ơn.
Good afternoon, board members and Dr. Williams. My name is Lina Martinez, and I will be providing interpretation services in Spanish for you today. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Lina Martínez. Yo voy a poder interpretar para ustedes, los miembros de la comunidad que necesiten ayuda con interpretación. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now moving to item 1.2, the Pledge of Allegiance. I ask everybody to please rise and join us in stating the pledge. Okay, we're now moving to item 1.3, rules for public comment, so I will defer to our board counsel.
Thank you, President Parker. Anyone wishing to speak with regard to items on the agenda should fill out a public comment card. Cards will be received up to 1/2 hour after the meeting begins. Each person shall be permitted to speak up to 2 minutes as established by the chair. I will recognize and give the speaker permission to proceed. The speaker shall state their name and address for the board records. Those who have a group concern are encouraged to select a spokesperson from the group to address the concern. Speakers are expected to be as concise as possible and to present their questions and comments in an objective manner and in accordance with good taste and decorum and without reference to or insinuations against the board, its members, or school system employees. Disruptions or disorderly conduct at the board business meeting will constitute grounds for the presiding officer to ask the security personnel to remove the offender. Thank you, President Parker.
Thank you very much. Now moving on to item 1.4, adoption of the agenda. Do we have any additions, deletions, or modifications to the agenda?
Yes, President Parker, I do believe that there is one addition to the agenda, which would be item 2.3 to vote on the superintendent's charter renewal and extension recommendations.
All right, thank you so much. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda as provided, or as amended?
Yes, I move to adopt the agenda as amended.
Second.
It's been moved by Vice President Zervigon and seconded by Ms. Eames. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the agenda is adopted. We are now moving on to item 2.1. I will turn it over to Dr. Williams.
All right, good afternoon, President Parker, board members, and the community. I hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. It was certainly a great time to reflect and to really think about all that we have to be grateful for. As NOLA PS has moved through the last few weeks, we did have a press conference recently where we shared our test scores, our most recent SPS scores. And you may recall that 79% of our schools continued to receive the A and B for growth. However, in terms of our overall score, we maintained a C. And in saying that, we know that there are lots of things that we can be proud of, but we also know that we continue to have a lot of work to do. So we're holding steady with the current letter grade that we had in the previous year. So everyone here today, from our families, teachers, staff, board members, and others, there's a lot to be proud of as it relates to NOLA Public schools. And we know that we've had some challenging times that we've faced in terms of the pandemic, as well as Hurricane Ida, and the impact that it had on our scholars academically, socially, as well as emotionally. And a large part of our work as a school district is to ensure that we're holding schools to a high standard, because that's what our scholars deserve, that's what our community deserves. And in light of this, I will share my annual recommendations for schools that are up for consideration for renewal during this renewal cycle. And despite the challenges that that we have all faced, our district has continued to move forward in our duty to ensure that we're providing high-quality schools and a high-quality education for our scholars. We do have our own charter school accountability framework, and then we also rely on information from the National Charter School Authorizations Association for additional principles and standards that guide our work on a regular basis. So at this time, I want to yield to Mr. Simmons, and he's going to provide an overview of the process that's used for this particular recommendation, as well as share data that was used in reaching the recommendations that I will share after his presentation. Mr. Simmons?
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Good afternoon, members of the board. Just want to share an overview of the process that's gotten us here today. And you should have, and I think it has been updated, a revised version of the presentation that was shared yesterday. And so here's the communication and engagement timeline. Starting with just the comprehensive evaluation schools, the things that they had to submit, their narratives, their super apps / school improvement plans, all those things were reviewed. The focus was not just on academic performances, but notices of non-compliance, financial health, organizational performance, and any additional information that the schools would like to share, wanted to share. We reviewed those plans. We reviewed the plans. Schools worked tirelessly, and on Tuesday, October 18th, we had a public hearing where the comprehensive evaluation schools were able to present information from the written narrative to the school board using the provided template. And also, the schools also submitted or distributed stakeholder surveys to staff, parents, and students, and provided that information back to us also for analysis. And today, the superintendent is making her recommendations to the Orleans Parish School Board. And the following activities and timelines are only applicable depending on the results that are announced today. Basically, with the comprehensive evaluation renewal activities, the school system will ensure direct engagement with families by sharing decisions and quickly informing families of future enrollment options for students before public recommendations are made to the board, and that will immediately start right after today. Also, beginning this week, the school system will collaborate with our comprehensive evaluation schools to ensure that families are supported during any transformation decisions and any enrollment choices. We also work to make sure that staff are retained at their current school throughout the remainder of the year, and staff are supported in their job search for the next school year. One of the major updates this year to the charter renewal process, just to increase transparency for the community on how the School Performance Renewal Index, which I usually just refer to as SPRI, is calculated, the measure on which the length of a charter term is determined. And in 2022, the Orleans Parish School Board created a simplified definition. So for extension or for your first renewal, the SPRI shall be the more favorable of either the most recent SPS score or the average of the two most recent SPS scores. And for second or subsequent renewals, the SPRI shall be the average of the two most recent SPS scores. Also, due to the impacts related to COVID-19, Orleans Parish School Board extended the following change to policy HB in 2022 that applies to this renewal cycle. So provided the superintendent the autonomy to offer a comprehensive evaluation to all schools that did not meet the current renewal standards. The 2022-23 charter renewal and extension process included the following: an extensive review of the school's state accountability data to assess if it meets renewal standards per the Charter School Accountability Framework, along with the school's ability to meet the expectations related to financial management and organizational compliance. Annual site visits, which includes additional conversations with the school leadership and charter organizations board chair and CMO leaders. And for schools that were eligible for the comprehensive evaluation, additional engagements were conducted to assess quantitative and qualitative data as well. The role of NOLA PS as the charter authorizer. So one of the district's core responsibility as a charter school authorizer is to hold schools accountable to a set of performance expectations that help ensure every student is provided with a high-quality education. The district believes that to deliver on its responsibilities, it must work diligently to achieve the following. Number one, hold schools to rigorous standards in a way that is fair and transparent, implement effective oversight systems, be transparent with schools, and share information with the public. An overview of the Charter School Accountability Framework renewal standards. Schools that receive a state-issued letter grade of A for the 3 immediate years prior to renewal, and also for 3 of the 4 years prior to renewal, schools receive a progress index of 100 or higher for economically disadvantaged students, and a re-enrollment rate of 90% or higher for economically disadvantaged students. And so that could earn a school a 10-year renewal. So a school that receives an A, an SPRI of A, they don't meet the other qualifications for the 10-year, or they receive a B, they receive a 7-year base renewal. And schools receive an SPRI equivalent to a letter grade of C, or schools receiving an SPRI equivalent to a letter grade of D and a progress index of 100 or higher can receive a base term of 5 years. Then schools that receive an SPRI to a letter grade of D and a progress index that ranks in the top quartile citywide among non-selective admissions K-8 schools or 9-12 schools for their prospective grades, prospective grade bands can receive a 3-year term. And then if we have any combination schools that receive an equivalent of D and either a K-8 progress index that ranks in the top quartile or a 9-12 progress index that ranks in the top quartile can receive a base term of 3 years. This is just a graphic of the renewal pathways. The first column, in short, is almost just basically an automatic renewal based on your letter grade. Then you have schools that with the D SPRI, they are eligible for comprehensive evaluation, or schools not yet issued a letter grade by the state, and also high schools or K schools in initial term that are not in the top quartile for progress index among non-selective schools are eligible for a comprehensive evaluation. And then also with the extension of the COVID, which continues through the 23-24 school year, schools that don't meet any of the standards are eligible for a comprehensive evaluation with a possible term up to 3 years. And that's up to the superintendent's discretion to offer that comprehensive eval. And when this policy expires, schools that don't meet any of the previous standards would be ineligible for a renewal. Next, the 22-23 renewal qualification renewal review. So here are our schools that qualified for a renewal review, and you see see them listed there with their 2019 SPS grade and their 2022 SPS grade and their SPRI letter grade, which is just the average, based on the simplified calculation that we've been using, the average of their 2 most recent SPS. Notice we did not use the simulated SPS to determine the SPRI, and their qualifications for their basic base term lengths as well. There is one asterisk. Go to the next slide. We're back one, I think. But there is, was that slide missed? There we go. There is one asterisk on this page for Rosenwald. You look, right there in their 2022 SPS grade and letter grade and score. Rosenwald is a slow growth high school, and its SPS is calculated differently than established high school. It does not have the cohort graduation rate or strength of diploma, which together account for 25% of their SPS score. These two measures typically raise high schools' SPS scores. Rosenwald's SPS reflects the ACT measure as 50%, which is in comparison to 25% for established high schools. The extension review. Per policy HB, charter school extensions and processes, the superintendent shall undertake an extension review in the fall of a school's 4th year of operation. The superintendent shall recommend to the school board by January 31st of a school's 4th year of operation that the school's operating agreement be A, extended to complete the initial 5-year term, or not extended and allowed to expire at the end of the school's 4th year of operation. And so through the site visits and other activities, all of these schools have met the eligibility for extension. Do want to note that Opportunities Academy is a specialized school for 18 to 22-year-olds that do not take state standardized tests, and so they will, never receive an SPS score. And Hines UNO is a slow growth elementary school that does not yet have an SPS score as state testing begins in the 3rd grade. And for back to comprehensive evaluation, during the comprehensive evaluation, the district will review a variety of data and information on the school across a host of factors, including but not limited to academic outcomes across a variety of student populations, enrollment, organizational leadership, and financial and organizational compliance. The school in the lease will need to respond to specific questions and participate in a dialogue with the district regarding its current and future status. When we began the comprehensive evaluation process, we did have 4 schools, but Walter L. Cohen College Prep High School withdrew its intent to renew, and NOCP subsequently surrendered their charter. The other schools are listed here along with their 2019 SPS grade and letter score, 2022 SPS grade and score, their SPRI grade and score, and also the quartiles. So you see Audubon Gentili, which is a slow growth elementary school that only has 1 year of SPS results. So its SPRI is only based on 1 year of data. And you see Encore Academy and Langston Hughes Academy. And I also provided just some data at a glance. Our team did provide more intense data to share with the superintendent, board president, and accountability chair as well. And so I did want to share a little bit of what we had put together as well. So this is just the academic data at a glance. It includes the SPS assessment index, the progress index, top growth percentage, and student mastery plus percentages. And the comparison to the district median excludes schools with admissions criteria or alternative schools. And the next set of data is the 2022 Mastery Plus by subgroups. And also the following that is the 2022 Top Growth by subgroups. And the last slide just shows some historical performance across their current charter term. And before I yield to Dr. Williams, are there any questions or comments?
Mr. Simmons, I just want to thank you for adding this additional data that was requested at the comprehensive evaluation meeting. I think it's very helpful and would love to see this, I think, every year moving forward. I know Mr. Ashley is not here, but I remember from his comments, he'd be grateful for that as well. Board members, any other comments or questions for Mr. Simmons? Okay.
All right, thank you. All right.
All right, thank you, Mr. Simmons. And I have another brief presentation with my recommendation. I'll wait a second for Ms. Brown to get that on the screen. And so what Mr. Simmons just shared is the comprehensive data that has been reviewed, and I'm going to walk you through the renewal review and also give my recommendation to our Board of Education. So, next slide. All right, so this shows the accountability recommendations for renewal, and I am recommending renewal as stated on this particular slide. It's for 5 years for each of the schools listed, and Frederick Douglass, the recommendation is for 7 years. Next, as Mr. Simmons mentioned before, these schools do qualify for an extension, and my recommendation is for them to be extended accordingly. In terms of recommendation for our comprehensive evaluation schools, we do have Audubon Gentili. My recommendation is for a 3-year contingent renewal. I do have a brief rationale here, and we'll go into more detail in just a moment. Mr. Simmons did mention that this is a slow-growth elementary school with only 1 year of official data. And they also do provide some programmatic diversity within their school. Encore Academy, my recommendation is for non-renewal. And just to briefly speak, they're in the 4th quartile for progress, and their enrollment is 18% below their target that was set for the 23-24 school year. Langston Hughes Academy, I recommend a 3-year contingent renewal, and they are in the 2nd quartile for progress, and their enrollment actually exceeds the building's program capacity. And Mr. Simmons mentioned that Walter L. Cohen College Prep High School withdrew their intent to renew. In terms of each school, some rationale for my recommendation. Audubon Gentili is consistently one of the most requested schools in NCAP, and its enrollment exceeds its planned maximum at its grade configuration. So it's a fairly new school, but a high-demand school. It's a slow-growth elementary school, and the first year of official, meaning non-simulated data, was 2022. And all of its released data has been from during the course of the pandemic. Its educational model, combining Montessori education with foreign language exposure, provides programmatic diversity to the city's school landscape. And there have been no suspensions in terms of discipline over the last 2.5 years, nor expulsions over the course of 5 years for Audubon. In terms of Encore rationale for the recommendation, it's in the 4th quartile for progress among non-selective schools. Encore is below the median in mastery or above performance among non-selective schools, ranging from 5th to 48th percentile. Encore's enrollment is more than 100 students below its lowest enrollment in its term and 18% below its target enrollment. In school year 21-22, 16.73% of its students had an out-of-school suspension, with only 22.6% of those students indicating that they felt safe while at school. Encore's attendance rate was the worst of its term in 21-22, and I do, of course, know that a lot of schools did have challenges in this area, but at 81.61%, with about half of those students considered chronically absent. Over the course of its term, Encore's SPS has had a general downward trend, going from 64.9% in 2018 to 48.6% in 22, while its assessment index has decreased from 52.3 to 28.8. Langston Hughes is in the 2nd quartile for progress among non-selective schools. Their student retention rate is greater than 90%. The enrollment exceeds the building's program capacity, and its SPS progress index scores are on an upward trend at this time. And I just want to state that none of this is easy. A lot of reviewing data, many conversations, and grappling with how do we move forward in the best interest of the community and our students. And that's a challenge, because I know that there's not a single school in our district that's not working to improve outcomes for our scholars and for our families. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. So it is a very tough decision to make. And certainly not one that I've looked forward to at any point during the last couple of months. I do want to thank the school leaders for their participation and cooperation in the process, and a special shout out to Mr. Simmons and his team, as well as our enrollment team and the others who were able to pull together a massive amount of data for me to review in order for me to feel confident in making the recommendations that I've made here today. And with that said, I will yield to President Parker.
Thank you so much. Board members, do you have any comments on Dr. Williams' presentation? Comments, questions? Ms. Eames.
I would like to thank Dr. Williams as well as the staff on the comprehensive report that was given to us. This is my first time for a renewal process, so I can appreciate all of the work. And of course, I've been in that position to have to give this kind of data to people, and the bad, sad news. But it is our job to make certain that every child in New Orleans public schools receives a quality education. And even though it's hard, it's fair to parents that they have an opportunity to place their children in good schools and high-quality schools that address their needs. And that is what we're going to sit down and discuss as a board. How can we make this process even better? I am asking for a 2 to 3 year plan from our superintendent and her staff on how can we get these D and F schools? There are 11 of them. That's way too many kids that we're failing in the city. And we need a plan in place for either take back, or we have to have more oversight with them. I am thoroughly satisfied with the work that is going on in the ABC schools. They're doing a fantastic job, and we need that replicated. Even those, a few of those schools are selected interest schools, but those that are not, what are they doing and how are they doing it so good with the same kind of population, the same students? So those are the things and challenges I'm asking the superintendent to look at with her staff. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Marshall.
You know, this is when we get to this point every year, many times the community wants to appeal to the board to overrule the superintendent. And I want you to consider what you'd be asking us to do, and that is to make an evaluation on our own as to whether the person we have hired, the expert that we have hired, and she has hired her staff to do this work, to meet with the school, to meet with the school leaders, to go in and do this evaluation process. You are asking us, without doing that work, without going in the schools and making those evaluations, you are asking us to have the expertise to overrule the expert that we've hired to do this work. That would not be a good policy for this board to follow. If we ever get to the point where the community is dissatisfied on the whole, not on individual cases, but on the whole dissatisfied with the decisions that are being made, then we need to review the persons that we've hired to make those decisions. But we aren't there. We have hired Dr. Williams and have every confidence in her and her expertise to make these decisions. So I'd like you to keep that in mind when you think about the decisions that were made today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Board members, other comments? Ms. Baldwin.
Thank you. And I would like to also thank you, Dr. Williams, and your staff for this presentation and for the work I know you've been engaged in for a long time on this. This is, one of the most important things we do. So appreciate how seriously, of course, you're all taking it. I have just I'm looking at your rationale, and I think I think this is a really good rationale for a lot of it. I want to just ask, Audubon is also in the fourth quartile for progress, and would argue that Encore also provides programmatic diversity to our system. So I know, we have to kind of weigh, right, the different benefits, costs and benefits of keeping a school open or closing it. So I guess I don't really have a question here, but just to sort of point out, I think it's important that we are very clear now and in the future about what the priorities are for why the decision is being made, so that, we can better plan, schools can better plan, the community understands what the criteria is and better understands why these decisions are being made. So I appreciate your rationale being laid out. I did want to talk about, one of the things we've been talking about during this optimization conversation is about facilities. It's not discussed here, and I will just admit ignorance. Can you talk a little bit about like the facilities that these different schools are in?
And I may have to yield to my team on this, but we do look at facilities as part of the CSAF, and when we look at operations and finances and so forth. I do know that the Encore building is owned. They have a bond for that building, and we own the other two buildings. If you've got some specific questions on facility conditions, then I see Tiffany ready to come to the mic if necessary.
Just want to acknowledge that it's part of the part of the review, right? Is that's one of the things we're trying to do, right? Is to keep kids or move kids into good facilities, better facilities, and we also have to be aware that we are a system of choice, and we need to be aware of what schools parents are choosing. We have committed to that right now, and we need to make sure that we're honoring those choices of parents as well. And so I appreciate the information on demand and on program capacity as well. I can see sort of where they are in relation to their capacity. I don't know what those numbers are not provided, so I don't know what they are, but I do appreciate the student retention and the demand data as well. Thank you. Just no questions, just thank you.
Dr. Batiste.
Thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to extend my thanks to Dr. Williams and her staff, who have done an outstanding job of going down and granulating the data points that were so germane to the decisions and recommendations that were being made today. And I'd like to echo the same sentiments of my colleagues who have spoken this evening. Everyone has said something that I'm feeling at this particular time. And like Mrs. Eames, this is my first rodeo sitting on this side. I have sat on the side where the superintendent is sitting tonight. And I know how difficult this decision really is, because we are affecting children, teachers, parents, and the communities that where these schools are currently located. But I want to applaud the decisiveness that you have used and the rationales that you have provided to support the recommendations that you have made. But it all comes back to the issue that I have with schooling in the New Orleans public schools. We have to increase the number of quality schools that are within our jurisdiction. And as we sit here as board members, we are responsible to our communities to ensure that only the best learning opportunities prevail for our children. We can't afford to lose one single child. When we lose one, we have already failed. So my point is, as we are identifying the charter schools that are not performing and are recommending closure, I would like to share the same sentiment that one of my colleagues said today, that we look at how can we as a district take back ownership of some of those buildings so that we can offer choice and voice in quality schools for all of our children. And I know it's not anything that can be done, very quickly. And I applaud and I would ask for my board members to join me and the other board member who has spoken already to see what it is that we can do in that vein. Because as I go out into the communities and hear people who, some of whom I don't even represent in the jurisdiction of the area that I have, they're saying, what are we doing for quality schools? And I think the quality schools that are working in the charter networks, they are to be applauded because it's no easy feat whatsoever. I want to thank them, and I think that your recommendation to continue and to extend those contracts are viable recommendations, but we also need to look at giving some other choice and voice to our other families who also need them. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Bodman.
I'm sorry. I was focused on the big decision and not, you reminded me, Dr. Batiste. Can you talk a little bit about the contingent renewal, what that means, what the process is like to plan for what those contingencies are, how monitoring goes, just so we better understand what that means, please?
Absolutely. And I met with the school leaders to discuss this. So at the top of the year, I'll have a data meeting with our school leaders. And my ask for them is to go ahead and start collecting formative data now so that we can look at data from this year and not continue to review the data from the previous school year. And in doing so, we will set some goals. Both of the schools will have a comprehensive improvement plan for continuous improvement and some solid goals with the focus being around improving academic outcomes. But we will have to really interrogate the data in terms of the specifics for each school. Reading and math, of course, will be prioritized, but the specific goals will be set in collaboration with the school leaders and their teams. And that continuous improvement plan will be the driver for the contingencies that will be listed in their contract. And this will be a part of their contract that's basically an appendix to the original contract. And it will clearly spell out what revocation could look like in the event that the contingencies are not met, and also the timelines for monitoring and review. So my expectation is by the end of February to have met with the school leaders and their teams and really dug deep to determine what those goals and strategies would be that would be a part of that continuous improvement plan. And then, of course, the contract will be the same time that we would typically do contracts for the upcoming cycle, which my expectation would be probably May for contract approval.
Thank you. And then, so this is something that is going to be reviewed regularly before this 3-year, just to be clear. I'm
right,
sorry
absolutely.
for
No,
being
that's a
ignorant.
great question because we're really focusing on formative data and not the summative data at the end of the year, so that throughout each of the years, we would have data that we could review on a quarterly basis.
And then since those will be appended to the contracts, that's something that we as a board will have to approve. So that will be public information, what those contingencies are and what their continuous improvement plan looks like.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you very much.
All right. Mr. Zervigon.
Yeah, especially would like to reemphasize what Board Member Marshall was saying in terms of the role of the board in the process, the way in which this is done and how and why. And then I also feel really good about board members then asking about the data, about the process, about the contracts, so everybody can understand this very, very clearly. And I would also ask everyone to remember that when it comes to the need to right-size the district, as we're calling it, to reckon with the declining enrollment and how to handle that, that cannot be separated from these points of decision when it comes to renewal, non-renewal, and how we're going to handle that if we know that not all buildings can be occupied and not all schools can continue to operate. This is a very difficult reality. As Dr. Batiste had pointed out, as superintendent, this is one of the most difficult things that you have to deal with. There are no easy answers, but I ask that we look at these decisions with that lens as well when the superintendent is tasked with an extremely difficult situation that we've hired the superintendent to take care of, one of them being the right sizing, the declining population, and everything that means. So I also thank you all for your work, for your very, I think, very sensitive work to the school communities, working with the school communities in a supportive manner to try to be clear about what it is you're asking from them in order to make your difficult decision. And I very much appreciate that approach that y'all have taken, and I thank you for your recommendations today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vice President Zervigon. Just a few additional comments, Dr. Williams. First, I just want to echo my fellow board members' comments about how grateful we are to you and your staff for this work. I know that we as a board ask a lot of questions, and your staff is always very quick to come up with the data that is requested. And I know that that takes a lot of work and a lot of time, and so I'm very grateful to them. I also just want to point out how grateful I am to all of the educators who are here and the educators who are at the schools that we're talking about today. None of the teachers at these schools taught harder because their school was up for extension or renewal. They are teaching as hard as they can every day for the kids of our city, and we're extremely grateful to them for their work, regardless of where they are on this PowerPoint. I also want to congratulate a few of the schools out here who are receiving their first renewal. I know that that is a big milestone in many schools. It is a small group of people's dream, and then it takes much more than 5 years to put into fruition. But this is a big milestone, and so I just want to congratulate those schools that are receiving their first extension or their first renewal. I also want to point out this is just another opportunity to highlight how we as a district have the opportunity and should move forward with a new accountability formula that accurately reflects what is happening in our schools. Because I look at this list and I'm thrilled for Frederick Douglass High School and the work that they've done, that Dr. Pierre Floyd has done, but to me, they're much higher than a B. In reality, if you walk that school, if you see what's going on there, they're doing great work. The same could be said for Ms. Haynes Smith at Bethune, Dr. Green at 35, Dr. Green at Eisenhower. There is excellent work being done in our schools that is not reflected in the state's accountability system. And so I wanted to highlight that, as I will probably highlight at the next meeting and the meeting after that. And the last thing I'll say, to echo your comments, Dr. Williams, and to echo comments of my board members, that this is not, non-renewing a school is never an easy decision, but the reality is it is one that is going to continue to happen in this district as we deal with the demographic changes of our city. In February, I think it was, we received an update from a demographer on the enrollment trends, and the high cost of housing and the lack of affordable housing, the lower birth rates, these are all contributing to a need for fewer seats. So non-renewals will continue to happen, and I know that you're putting together, I think you said, a 5-year plan on this, and we as a board look forward to seeing that. But I just want to make sure that, I know my colleagues know this, but just to make sure everybody knows that this is part of the district optimization process. This extension renewal process is part of the district optimization process and will continue to be for the foreseeable future. Before I turn over to Mr. Marshall, because I know he has one comment, I just wanted to highlight a note from our board council. I know that we have some comment cards. We're going to take comment cards at item 2.3. So that will be the next item. Mr. Marshall.
Well, you read my mind when you talked about accountability. And, accountability starts with what we have in mind in terms of quality education, right? And the state mandates that we look at things very narrowly in terms of academic performance, the test scores. And everybody that I talk to in the community, everybody wants a quality education in every school, in every neighborhood. We want excellence. That's one of the 3 words that our superintendents, equity, excellence, and joy, right? But we don't all share the same definition of what that means, right? Because once we get outside of academic standards, many of the schools several of the schools that were closed thought their kids went to school every day. They had joy. They performed in a band. They were happy at their school, and the parents were happy. But in terms of how the education of that child, it was determined that that was an F. So we didn't share the same viewpoint of what that quality education was that that child was receiving. That's one of the things that I thought was always lacking in our system. One of the things that I tried to address in my 10 years on the board. And then finally, in this year, we are actually defining a quality education with the community. We are doing that work as you speak through, it's embedded in the work of the Innovation and Stability Committee. But in early next year, we will have a definition that we all agree on represents a quality education in terms of the outcomes we expect for our children. From that, we can then have an accountability system that measures all of those factors. All of them, not just the test scores, right, but the development of the whole child. That is in process. That is what we're working on. The next thing from that is then we have a way of measuring each one of those things, right, and then asking the superintendent to give us the rationale in each one of those areas as to how they meet that benchmark in all of the areas besides just academic excellence, right? And the last thing that I would want to say that has not been mentioned is that when the reviews are done in the future, once we've done this important work and we've come up with the CSAF to measure all of this, that we get this at least 30 days out, right? So that we can actually see this rationale and we can actually look at each benchmark, right? And then have that school address each benchmark, okay? And we have time enough to do all of those things. But it's a work in progress. But judging by where we are with this administration and what has been now, 3-4 months, I mean, we made more progress in this short period of time than we made in all of the years that I've been on the board previous to that. So I just want the community to feel good about where we are and where we're going. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Not seeing any other board comments, we'll now move on to item 2.3. Let me make sure I have my notes. We have added an item to the agenda, which is item 2.3, to approve the superintendent's recommendations and waive the right to reject the recommendations at the next board business meeting. Is that accurate? Did I say that accurately, Board Counsel?
I think your item 2.3 was simply to
that's right.
vote on the superintendent's recommendations.
Thank you very much. So I would just want to point out for colleagues and for members of the public and anyone who is viewing this, that the motion that I am about to make is not required under policy, but that our OPSB policy doesn't prohibit the board from taking actions on the superintendent's recommendations. And so momentarily, I'm going to make a motion that we approve these recommendations from the superintendent and also waive the right that we have in policy HB as a board to overturn her recommendations at the next meeting. And the reason why I'm making that recommendation, usually we have the ability as a district to receive school performance scores earlier in the year and make the decision at our regular November board meeting. Because school performance scores were delayed this year, and the common application is now open, I would like to send a clear message to families that decisions have been made and they can make any enrollment decision that they so choose based off of the superintendent's recommendation and our action as a board today. In the past, what has happened is the superintendent has made a recommendation, and then a month has passed, and things have been in limbo, and I would like to eliminate that confusion or, I would just like to eliminate that confusion for families. So with that, I will make a motion. Then, if the board is willing, there will be a second. Then we'll have public comment. Then we'll have board comment, and then we'll have a vote. I'm just narrating all this because I know that it's not on our script in front of us here. So I am moving that we approve the superintendent's recommendations presented today and waive the right to reject those recommendations at the next board business meeting. Is there a second?
I'd like to second.
Okay. And we will now move to public comment.
Our first public comment card is from Sabrina Pence. Sabrina, if you could come to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
Good afternoon, Dr. Williams and distinguished board members. I'm Sabrina Pence, 300 North Broad Street, 70119. First, I wanted to just thank you for the recommendation for a renewal with contingencies for Langston Hughes. I'm the CEO of First Line Schools, and I significantly hope that the board supports the superintendent's recommendation. I wanted to just highlight a few things about the growth that LHA has demonstrated in the last year, and I appreciate that, Dr. Williams, you really showed that about why we should be renewed. We achieved a 100.6 in our progress index for 1 year. We're the 4th highest absolute growth school in the last year. For SPS, we are 12 out of 42 open enrollment schools. When it is math absolute achievement, we are 7 out of 42 open enrollment schools. As a network, we are the 2nd highest performing K-8 network in terms of absolute SBS, both average and median. And we believe that this recommendation is both an investment in LHA's progress that they have made, that we plan for them to continue to make. We are making lots of strategic investments to make sure that kids continue on a progress trajectory, both at Langston Hughes and our other schools. And I think the question that you always have to wrestle with in these moments is, if you open a school, close a school, will kids be better off? And I think with those brief data points, it's really clear, like, kids would not be better off. They would not be going to a better school. As you guys know, First Line is the first organization to start charter schools in New Orleans. We're deeply rooted here, and we're very committed to working on improvement. And we're very much looking forward to partnering with the district about what contingent renewal looks like, and we'll figure that out hopefully together. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pence.
Our next public comment card is from Terry Smith.
Good afternoon, Dr. Williams and board members. I think most of you know I'm Terry Smith. I'm the founder and CEO for 11 years of Encore Academy. When I came in here today, I had a history of Encore that I wanted to share with all of you, but when you decided to vote today, that all changed, so I'm going all in here. I feel compelled to share some things I want to be sure that you know and understand, and I completely appreciate all the comments from the board members, especially Mr. Marshall when you said that the accountability framework needs to take into consideration a lot of different things, and Encore represents those things that are not measured. The mental health piece, you guys know, the arts piece, right? But I think it's very, very important for me to say, and I don't feel comfortable saying this, frankly, because I have great respect for what Audubon and Gentili has done. However, it's really important for you to know that we have almost the exact same performance over the last couple years. In fact, our growth performance, as you know, the index is the average of 2 years. Our growth performance last year was an 85. It was a 15-point growth from the simulated year. Our growth for our ELA kids in every single grade was an A for progress growth. Math, we know we all have work to do. It was A's, B's, and below, right? So that, the question is raised by my board and everyone else, including leaders across the city. How can you approve one school and not renew the other when it's very, very similar? And I have some questions. Since when did enrollment become part of this process? At Encore, we set targets and we build a budget on different targets. We build a budget responsibly. That's why we have a fund balance. That's why we've never had to let people go in October. So I think it's up to the school to make sure that we have an enrollment that we can work with and make the budget work. And I hope that you'll give me some more time.
Yeah, I was just
Thank
going to say,
you.
Ms. Smith, feel free to take your time.
Thank you. Encore had 650 kids prior to the pandemic. At October 1, we had 413. We're now at 434. We've gotten kids over the last month or so. And I know that will continue because people want to come to us because we are a neighborhood school. Our kids are going to be without a neighborhood school right there in the 7th Ward if we're not renewed. I want to go back to the budget. I just want to say, it's our responsibility to make sure our budget works. And nobody has ever asked, is your budget going to work? I mean, if you feel like you need to have our budgets and have a conversation with people, then do that. But we work with Force Sector, which is with most of the schools here in New Orleans and across Louisiana and the country. And we are very responsible about our money. And when people say, and I hear it all the time, you can't operate a school with 400 kids, that's nonsense. You can't operate a high school with 400 kids, but you can absolutely operate a school with 400 kids if you manage your money well. A couple other points, if you don't mind. I need to make sure that this board is aware of our bond. Yes, we own our building. Why did we buy our building? We bought our building because Orleans Parish School Board couldn't give us a building. We shared the Crocker building. At first we were in Toro. We were the first school there. Then we shared the Crocker building. And then whenever New Orleans College Prep took over, they didn't have room for us after the second year, so we went to Dibert. And in that process, knowing that we weren't going to get a building, we bought the old John Shaw building in the 7th Ward. We partnered and renovated it so we'd have a campus for our kids and an arts facility. So when you do that, you have to partner with an organization for money, which we did. And knowing that within 7 years, we had to either refinance or get a bond. So in 2021, and the former superintendent endorsed it. We were very successful in getting a bond, and I think we're number 6 or 7 of charter schools to actually have the State Bond Commission approve a bond. So now here we are, and I'm not saying you should keep a school open just because of a bond, but you need to understand the implications. If we're not renewed, we default on our bond unless you want to buy that building, and I was already told you didn't want to. So if we default on the bond, and somebody here is probably going to say, from the association, is probably going to say the same thing, there won't be another charter school in this state that will get a bond through the State Bond Commission. So you need to be aware of that. There are implications far beyond Encore and our small campus. Also, I talked about growth. Everybody who understands growth and progress in Louisiana knows that as our kids get older, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, it's much harder to hit those targets because those gaps become very, very wide. We had a 15-point growth last year. Audubon went down, actually, in growth for that year, and we tested 190 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, and we still managed to get that growth with those difficult targets. So I want that just to sink in. Also, we have 19% more economically disadvantaged kids in our building. And you know what that translates to. So I have all kinds of stuff that I could share with you, but those were the most important ones that I felt that I had to put out there. I I already knew going into this, there was no way the board was going to overturn what their new superintendent said. I've said that for 2 days, and I get it. I used to be a board member. I completely get it. But you also have to think about the kids in our neighborhood and think about, are they really going to go to a better school? Are they really going to go to a good school? Because there are a lot of schools that are performing within 5 points of us or below. And those are the schools they're going to end up going to. I guess I've said enough, but I felt I owed it to my kids and my families after 11 years to do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Smith.
Our
Yep, I was going to
President
say,
Parker?
next comment, please, Board Counsel.
our next comment card is from Sarah Vandergriff Kelly.
Good afternoon. Sarah Vandergriff Kelly with the Louisiana Association of Public Charter Schools. I live at 5844 Louis 14th Street apartment until the city ever approves my building for a house. This is never easy. This is the hardest part of the whole charter school concept. Unfortunately, we will also be at this table doing with this with the Board of Education later this month and with the East Baton Rouge School Board. Closures for many of you who are new to this as board members or new to this administration, again, this is not easy. This is hard. This is tearful. And now you can also see why it's so difficult to make changes in the traditional public school world, because no one likes to be in this position. No one likes to make the hard call. But what we try to do is we root ourselves in what does it mean to be a charter school? What is this movement all about? And this movement is really about rooting in how do we make decisions in the best interest of kids? And in making those decisions in the best interest of kids moving forward, we got to make sure that we are always rooted in data, objective measurements, and clear rules and policies so that everyone knows what the rules of the game are, right? So that everyone knows when you enter this where the level of expectations, and most people can generally expect what the outcome will be. That being said, this board has made difficult decisions for the past 2 years, even in COVID. No one else in the state has, no one else in the country has. So you all have a board that has consistently stepped up and made tough decisions. That being said, with everyone in the school community looking forward to, as we move forward with the new administration, new board members, you all also engaging in conversations about potentially changing policies. Thinking, is this right? Is this fair? Are these the right policies that we have to think about who's worthy of having the privilege of continuing to operate a charter school? And we just ask that you keep that in mind, that as you redesign policies, you make sure that you have all stakeholders that are at the table to talk about their experience and to make sure what you're rooted in is objective measurements that are clearly defined, that don't permit you to end up in subjective territory and politics and exceptions. So we just say that as you move forward to continue being a strong authorizer so that everyone knows what data is being used and that's being used in a consistent manner across all schools and that policies are objective and fair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Vandergriff.
And our last comment card is from Steve Corbett.
Good afternoon. Steve Corbett, 2302 Worth Place. Good afternoon, Dr. Williams, members of the Orleans Parish School Board, and the leadership team of NOLA Public Schools. My name is Steve Corbett, CEO of Audubon Schools. Just want to take a brief moment to thank Dr. Williams and her team for recommending a charter renewal for Audubon Gentilly. We have a beautiful school community, highly satisfied families, students, and staff. We also have a commitment to continual growth and excellence and appreciate the opportunity to continue building Audubon Gentilly towards greater levels of success. We also appreciate the process. We know that this process is not simply about accountability scores and numbers, although that is a major component. We know it's a process in which we were asked to deliver a narrative, to explain our plans, the changes that we made, the decisions we were making to strengthen our school. appreciate the opportunity for NOLA Public Schools to visit our schools, which was a very successful visit, to see our classrooms, to see the work that's been completed, to see the changes and the shifts that have occurred, and to see what many are calling an incredible school community at this very moment. We're incredibly confident that we're going to continue to provide excellent resources and supports for our students. And we know that we're going to be able to do the things with the support of Dr. Williams to accomplish these goals. We know these aren't easy decisions. We thank you for your diligence in assessing our school and your trust in us in delivering exceptional results for our school community. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Seeing no additional public comment cards, is there any board comment on this item? Vice President Zervigon?
Yeah, I want to thank the board for accepting the motion to support the superintendent to move forward in these recommendations. We've been looking at what is the role of the elected school board in Orleans Parish, what we are allowed and not allowed to do under special rules that apply to us. You will notice that we find ourselves voting to waive our right to overturn at the next meeting, which is weird language. But that language is that way because of the way that statute's written. Therefore, policy must reflect statute, and what is or is not available to us. I would like everyone to still acknowledge this, I would believe it to be, as an affirmative vote to support the superintendent in the recommendations that were made, that's what we are actually doing. I think it's usually the right thing to do to be able to support your superintendent in their work. So thank you all for accepting the motion, for taking the stand as was pointed out what our role is. And to all the school operators, before I was on the board, that was where I was at, was a school operator in the community, putting everything I had into schools after Katrina, burning the midnight oil, making this stuff fly. So it is very emotional for me as well to understand what it means to move on like this, in this way, at this period, in the situation that we currently find ourselves in. It won't be the last time that we have to do this, but just to share with you, I understand what it means for the community and for you all as educators, for your families, and we do not take this lightly. But that would sum up my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bedwin?
Thank you, and I'd like to thank Ms. Smith for your passionate defense of your school. It's good to learn more about it, and I appreciate your comments. I want to also echo Ms. Kelly's comments about the need for consistency and transparency and the use of data across, the consistent use of data across schools and across these decisions. And we'll just add to what Mr. Zervigon just mentioned. If this is something, this type of vote, either to waive our future right or however it may be worded in the future, is going to be a common, or if we're going to do this again frequently, then I would like to ask as a board member to better understand. I mean, I appreciated the rationale. I appreciated the data that we were given, but would like in the future to receive more information on data collected and what's been reported by schools and what we're looking at. Because, typically I leave that to the superintendent and their staff. So just a request for that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll make just a couple of logistical comments for those who may be wondering about the process and kind of repeat things that have been done before in similar cases. So regardless of the school, well, let me start over. Should the superintendent's recommendations be approved and not overturned, students at Encore will finish the school year at Encore. This would be a decision that does not take effect until the end of the 22-23 school year. So day to day, if you're a student at Encore, your experience should not change. Additionally, in the past, NOLA PS has provided one-on-one guided support for families as they complete their NCAP for the next school year. I know in the past we've worked with groups like Ed Navigator, and I would imagine that we are going to continue to do something similar to ensure that students at Encore students and families at Encore receive the maximum amount of support that they can to complete the application process. Additionally, those students should receive closing school priority in the Common Application Program, which means essentially they have, I think it's the highest priority that you can receive, and I'm seeing some staff members nod their heads. So closing school priority means students who are currently at Encore that are not in their terminal grade will receive closing school priority when they complete their applications. And then the last logistical item that I will mention is, in the past, the district and our partners have shown an extreme willingness to work with closing schools and their staffs to make sure that their staffs have placement in the next school year, so that those who are currently working at Encore will be able to find a landing spot for next school year. And I'm sure that your staff will, again, do something similar to ensure that those teachers, administrative staff are supported. So while this is a difficult decision, it is also one where the district, should this decision move forward, the district will pour resources into families and staff at Encore to make sure that they receive the best outcomes possible. Okay, that concludes my comments. Board members, do you have any other comments on this?
I have
Mr. Marshall.
I would like to see us vote on each school separately. Okay, instead of voting on all recommendations together. I'd like to amend the motion to say that we should vote on each school separately.
Okay. So we need a second for that motion. And not hearing a second, that means the amendment does not move forward. The proposed amendment does not move forward, and the vote would be, again, on all recommendations.
Then I would like to ask the superintendent a question.
Sure.
Okay. Understanding that part of your decision was based on enrollment, part of your decision was based on growth, et cetera. Did you hear anything from Ms. Smith today that would give you cause to maybe reflect and maybe reconsider those things in your decision?
So as I stated before, it's a tough decision, but I stand by my recommendation.
Okay, and thank you.
Okay, seeing no additional board comment, there's a motion on the floor to approve the superintendent's recommendations and pursuant to policy HB, waive the right to reject the recommendations at the next board business meeting. It has been moved by me, seconded by Vice President Zervigon. It is time to vote. All those in favor of this recommendation say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. And we are now moving on to item 3.1. Thank you again to all the educators who are in the room and all the educators who are currently at schools doing the hard work of educating the children of our city. Let's see, we are now moving to item 3.1. I believe I yield to you, Board Counsel, is that right?
I'm happy to walk us through
nope,
this
never mind.
section.
Nope, I got ahead of myself. I turned the page too quick. So the time is now 2:17 p.m. May I have a motion from a board member to move into executive session?
So move.
Is there a second? I will second.
Second.
Okay. It's been moved by Mr. Marshall, seconded by Vice President Zervigon. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We will now move into executive session. All right. Let me see here. I'm calling back to order the November 19th November 29th, 2022 Orleans Parish School Board Special Board Business Meeting. The time is now 3:08 p.m. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Parker,
Present.
Mr. Zervigon.
Present.
Mr. Ashley, Dr. Batiste.
Present.
Ms. Bodwin. Ms. Eames. Mr. Marshall.
Present.
Also present, Dr. Avis Williams, Superintendent, and Ashley Halpern, Board Counsel. You have a quorum.
Thank you so much. I'm now going to yield to our board counsel to report on matters held in executive session.
Sure. There were two items that were discussed during executive session. Item 3.1, Orleans Parish School Board versus Woodrow Wilson Construction, LLC, and the Hanover Insurance Company. And item 3.2, Securities and Exchange Commission, matter A3935. Moving now to action item 3.1. It is recommended that the Orleans Parish School Board approve the settlement of this matter as recommended by its legal counsel. May I have a motion to adopt action item 3.1?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by President Parker and seconded by Mr. Zervigon. There's no public comment on this action item. Seeing no board comment. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Item 3.2 on the agenda was simply a discussion. There's no action item there. So with that, President Parker, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. We're now at item 4.1, adjournment. Seeing that there are no further items on the agenda, may I have a motion to adjourn? It's been moved very quickly by Mr. Marshall, seconded by Dr. Batiste. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The time is now 3:09 p.m. This meeting is adjourned.